But I remembered an anecdote from my childhood where my father told me, and I think it was because was stressing about something, and I was trying to get to sleep. And he said, don't stress, calm down. And here's why. If you stress too much, it can actually make your hair fall out. In fact, I have a cousin who lay down one night stressed and woke up the next morning and all of his hair was on his pillow. It is true that our psychological well-being can impact both the coloration or lack thereof and the growth rates of our hair. That's a real thing. And the reverse is also true, which is that as hair starts to thin or fall out or change color, many people experience intense anxiety or even depression. Hair loss is ongoing from about age 30 to age 50. It's only by age 50, however, that about 50% of people out there start to notice that hair loss, that the hair growth itself is strongly regulated by hormones such as estrogen, thyroid hormone, insulin-like growth factor, and that other hormones, in particular the androgens, so things like testosterone proteins, so that actually create the hair, the melanocytes that darken that hair, that give it pigment, that sebaceous gland and the oil sebum that provides some important antimicrobial and other properties to that general region, and that erector pili muscle. That erector pili muscle, as I mentioned earlier, is important for creating goosebumps, and it's important for keeping huskies warm in cold environments. Okay? So there are 3 critical stages of the life cycle of a hair. There's the anagen phase, during which the hair grows. There's the catagen phase, during which the hair actually starts to recede and die. Right? The protein is actually disappearing from the bottom up. And then we have the telogen phase, which is the phase in which the stem cell population is what's called a semi-quiescent, semi-quiet, or completely quiescent, where it's not active at all. Those 3 phases make up the life cycle of a hair, such as dihydrotestosterone cause hair loss, and why inhibiting things like dihydrotestosterone can support the preservation of hair that you have and the regrowth of hair. Dihydrotestosterone, which is a derivative of testosterone, causes changes in that bulb region where the stem cells reside. It shortens or halts the anagen phase of hair growth, and it extends and promotes the catagen and telogen phase. Since I'm losing a bit of hair on either side of the midline in the front, it almost certainly has to do with the fact that I have a higher density of androgen receptors there as opposed to, say, on the crown of my head, where for whatever reason my hair seems to grow thickest. Other people lose hair on the crown, in the back and top, but not in the front, and some people lose it all over. Now you understand why hair loss occurs in certain regions of the body. You should also understand that the androgen receptors on the face are also what are responsible for beard growth. And this is where it can get a little bit tricky, but a lot of things will start to make sense if you can understand this and internalize this. If you have a high density of androgen receptors on your face, well then as your DHT levels go up with age, you will be able to grow a thicker and thicker beard. In fact, it is rare to see someone who can grow a thick beard in their youth, but not so much as they get older. In fact, the reverse tends to be true. So the pattern of androgen receptors differs between the scalp and the face and the back. Okay, on your back, you have androgen receptors, and their DHT stimulates hair growth. So if you know someone who has a very hairy back, or if you have a very hairy back, that means you have a high density of androgen receptors on your back. If you have a beard and that beard is thick, well, then you have a high density of androgen receptors on your face. However, a high density of androgen receptors anywhere on your scalp is going to predispose those regions to androgen-dependent alopecia or hair loss in those particular regions. And by ingesting caffeine or by applying topical caffeine ointment or cream to the scalp, you can suppress PDE sufficiently enough to increase IGF-1 and increase some hair growth, or at least maintain hair growth in that region. Now, this may come as a shock. It might seem a little bit esoteric or even outside the margins of typical treatments, but head-to-head, topical caffeine application can be as effective as minoxidil application without actually lowering things like blood pressure and potentially increasing prolactin and some of the other negative, let's call them negative because they are, side effects of minoxidil. So caffeine ointments and caffeine present in various hair treatments and creams, etc., is starting to become a more prominent theme out there. I will include a reference to caffeine and its uses for offsetting hair loss. Keep in mind that topical caffeine ointments shouldn't necessarily be applied every single day. So this is the sort of thing you might do 3 times a week. The concentration of caffeine in different ointments varies tremendously. Most of the studies of caffeine on the stem cell niches that control hair growth and extension of the anagen phase of hair growth, that both minoxidil and caffeine are generally used as a preventative for reducing hair loss over time. They are not expected, and they do not, as far as we know, create new hair growth to any sufficient degree. If any of you have used caffeine ointments or minoxidil and observed new hair growth that was robust, making caffeine a really good choice to think about in conjunction with the various chemical treatments aimed at directly attacking the DHT pathway. There's one very direct way to increase hair growth and maintain the hair that you have on your head, and that's to increase IGF-1. That can be accomplished through prescription drugs such as growth hormone and things that stimulate the release of growth hormone and IGF-1. Keep in mind, growth hormone is released from the anterior pituitary during the first hours of sleep, especially when you haven't eaten anything for the 2 hours prior to sleep, and especially when you get regular bedtimes. Yes, this is a real thing. And they increase bone mass and density. They can increase mainly fat loss, not so much muscle size, but they can increase leanness, and they increase hair growth. They can increase turnover of skin. They can make skin look more youthful. All these things sound wonderful. Natural production of IGF-1 is that, as its name suggests, insulin growth factor 1, it is insulin dependent in many ways. If not for its secretion, then for its action at the hair follicle and stem cell. There are a few supplements, so these are over-the-counter supplements, such as myo-inositol, taken at dosages of about 900 milligrams before sleep, which, by the way, can also assist in sleep, or things like berberine or metformin, which are known to improve insulin sensitivity. Each and every one of these has its own profile of positive and negative effects. The lowest number of side effects is associated with 900 milligram myo-inositol taken about 30 minutes before sleep, mostly because it can make people a little bit drowsy, and it does aid sleep in some really great ways. But really, exercise and maintaining a healthy nutritional program are also going to be key. You just can't discard those. The other thing that's really important for maintaining proper hair growth, this anagen phase, is that you need sufficient iron. This is because iron and ferritin play a key role in the cell growth pathways that go from the stem cells to the stimulation of keratin within the hair itself. And if your iron is low, you may need to supplement your iron. If your iron is too high, that's not good either. But iron plays a key role in the anagen phase of hair growth. So you want to make sure you at least have sufficient iron. And if you don't, you want to make sure that you're getting it from nutrition and or supplementation. Dihydrotestosterone. And dihydrotestosterone does two things that are bad for hair maintenance and hair growth. First of all, it shortens the anagen phase, that growth phase. So whatever hair is going to grow is going to occur over a shorter period of time. Second of all, because of the presence of androgen receptors on the stem cell niche area and around it, it actually miniaturizes the follicle and the stem cell niche. In other words, it makes the population of cells that give rise to more hair protein smaller and can eliminate it altogether. And that is why anything that reduces 5-alpha reductase is going to reduce DHT, is going to maintain or extend the growth phase, the anagen phase of hair growth, and is going to offset or prevent some of the telogen phase, the pinching off and the removal of that stem cell niche. Now, one substance that we know can inhibit 5-alpha reductase, although it does it pretty weakly, is saw palmetto, which is an extract of the saw palmetto berry. The good thing about saw palmetto treatment is that it is known to have very few, if any, side effects. There might be some side effects in about 1% of people, but it's not associated with a lot of side effects. It's also known that when taken at about 300 milligrams per day, and here it doesn't have to be that strict. Most of the studies that I explored involved taking anywhere from 200 to 500 milligrams of saw palmetto, but most of them focused on about 300 milligrams of saw palmetto per day, divided into 2 or 3 doses. Why? Well, it has a relatively short half-life, meaning it's going to get cleared from the bloodstream, and more importantly, its biological action is going to be very short-lived. So if you can get a hold of 50 or 100 milligram capsules or tablets of saw palmetto and divide those up, taking them in the morning, afternoon, and evening, or even just in the morning and evening to achieve a total of about 300 milligrams per day, that's going to very likely help you hold on to some of the hair that you would have otherwise lost, maybe even grow some new hair.